All right, Crim 1, here we go with Chapter 3. This one is another one that's kind of boring and long, so I'm sorry. But it's kind of important. Ooh, I don't like how it looks there. Let's see, how do I get that to change? I want it to look like, I'm not really sure. Display settings, no. There we go. Okay, so hi, Chapter 3, Causes of Crime. We're going to skip through the learning objectives and start with a couple of different, these are theories of crime. These are theories that people have come up with over the years as to why people commit crimes. So my favorite is the classical school of criminology. Basically, the people who believe in the classical school of criminology believe that we, people, have free will, and we ultimately make choices to commit crime. We weigh the pros and cons, and we decide one way or the other that either it is worth it to commit a crime or it is not worth it. We have rational choice and we have free will. So people who believe in the classical school of criminology weigh the pros and cons, we have free will, and we choose to commit crime. Okay? That is the belief of the classical school of criminology. So I want you to kind of read through these. Rational choice. We weigh the pros and cons. Another kind of concept in here would be something called the pleasure-pain principle. We weigh the pleasure against the pain. The pleasure we might receive out of committing the crime versus the pain we might suffer as a result if we got caught for that crime. Classical school of criminology. Okay, next. Oh, here's a picture. Yay. The positivist school of criminology. This school of criminology, or this train of thought, believes that basically we do not have a choice. We are born criminals, and basically criminal behavior is beyond our control. The positivist school believes that criminal behavior is a product of biological, psychological, or social forces beyond our control. They talk about atavism, which is basically the concept that a criminal is a throwback to an earlier time, kind of like a caveman who isn't evolved enough to understand the difference between right and wrong. Okay, oops, sorry, that was an accident. So the positivist school of criminology here, crime is not a choice, crime is beyond our control, and we have no choice. We are born criminals. Okay, so this is the second one. This is also part of the positivist school, neurobiological factors of brain function. Basically saying that because of some brain malfunction, poor impulse control due to a partially developed brain, that some of us might not have the brain or mental capacity to know the difference between right and wrong, and might actually participate in criminal behavior because of our brain function. This is, and let me start with, or finish with, or mention, I should say, all of these things can be underlying factors for criminal behavior. The classical school, the positivist school, neurobiological factors. Some people do have brain tumors, and those do cause, I can't say they cause criminal behavior, but they do cause behavioral issues that could lead to criminal behavior. Chronic violent behavior. Sometimes people with chronic brain injuries, football players, things like that. TBI, traumatic brain injuries, have been known to be violent. Some people have issues with neurotransmitters, chemical imbalances. So there can be a lot to criminal behavior. Now, some people are just bad people. So don't get me wrong. It's not always issues with the brain, but it can also be issues with the brain. Hormones. You all have probably heard this before. Ladies, certain times of the month. I know, nobody wants to hear that. But there have been women who have been found not guilty by reason of insanity because they had premenstrual dysphoric dysfunction, or basically extreme PMS. Testosterone levels sometimes are very high in men, and people have argued that men are more violent than women because they have more testosterone. So there can be many things involved in again, criminal behavior. Genetics. If your father was a violent rapist, are you going to be a violent rapist? You might be more likely to be so. Does that mean absolutely you will be? No, but it's possible. Because of genes, DNA, things like that. There's been many, many, many studies. And then I think, is there the twins in here? There we are. Okay. Identical twins. Very interesting study that took place where identical twins raised in very different homes were found to behave or have criminal histories much more similar to their biological parents than to their adoptive parents. So there is a suggestion that DNA can have an impact on criminal behavior as well. Strong influence on criminal behavior. So again, these are all things that can have an impact on criminal behavior. There's cute little twins. Mental disorders, of course, if someone has a medical condition that could interfere with their daily day-to-day function, could that have an impact on criminal behavior? Of course it could. Certain mental disorders can make people act in violent ways, absolutely. Psychoses, serious mental disorders that distance individuals from reality. Can that have an impact on criminal behavior? Of course. Diagnostic and, this is the DSM. This is the book that psychologists and psychiatrists use to diagnose mental health disorders. The standard classification reference used by mental health professionals. And they diagnose things like schizophrenia, paranoid disorders, and severe mood disorders. DSM-4, I think, is what they're on now. And this gets updated fairly regularly. So they're talking about schizophrenia and schizophrenia spectrum disorders. These are disorders where people basically kind of lose concept of reality. Very sad. And it happens typically a little bit later in life. Not old, I mean, not in their youth, usually early 20s. Major mood disorders, bipolar, things like that. There you go. Postpartum psychosis, scary, scary, scary. This happens a decent amount. And unfortunately, some women actually end up harming their babies and even killing their babies. These are all serious mental disorders. Psychopathy, personality disorder characterized by a lifelong pattern of antisocial behavior where the individual feels no remorse. Those are scary people. Psychopaths are manipulative, superficial, and self-centered. Criminal psychopaths commit more than half of the violent crimes in society. Wow. Post-traumatic stress disorder. This is something that certainly my generation saw a lot of. A lot of people my age were in Desert Storm. And then the generation right after mine probably was the Iraq War. A lot of people who have been police officers, correctional officers, firefighters, who've gone to the military, things like that, suffer from PTSD. Very traumatic. It can be really difficult and cause a lot of suffering. Oof, yeah, that's some serious suffering right there. Psychological factors, intelligence and morality. The cognitive brain. Okay, so this is basically way over my head as far as psychology is concerned. But the one thing that we're talking about here is, can a person's level of intelligence affect whether or not they become a criminal? And ultimately, basically, are they smart enough to know any better? Do they have the level, do they have the mental capacity to know better? And some people literally do not have the mental capacity to know the difference between right and wrong, and it's very scary. Um, and these are people that are living on the streets, you know, that you're seeing in your everyday life. Is there a relationship between intelligence and criminal behavior? Yeah, there really is. But some people are also very, very intelligent, yet they lack empathy, and their emotional intelligence is so low. Those are your really scary, smart offenders, typically your serial killer types. Fortunately, there aren't as many of those. I think we're all lucky that there aren't very many of those. I might kind of skip over this one. Yes. Okay, we're going to move on a little bit more now to kind of more social causes for criminal behavior, causes of criminal behavior that are more kind of society-based, let's say that. So social learning theory would basically suggest that we, criminals, learn criminal behavior from others, which clearly makes sense. Children learn violent behavior from seeing violent behavior in movies, it says here, but you know, a lot of kids, unfortunately, are learning violent behavior from home. They learn alcoholism. They learn that they're, you know, when their parents are drinking or smoking weed or using drugs or stealing or, you know, or beating each other up. They learn all that from home. And these are things that are learned early in their life. I'm going to kind of skip over this Freud stuff. Sociological factors, study of human beings, sociological factors that can relate to the study of crime and its causes. So consider each of these little bullet points and consider, do they impact whether or not someone gets involved in criminal behavior? Income. Why might someone who has a lower or higher income be more likely to be involved in criminal behavior? Or might they? I don't know. Does it have any impact? The answer is yes. Lower income people are more likely to be involved in criminal behavior. Why is that? There's probably about 1 million reasons why. Stress probably is one of them. Trying to figure out how you're going to get your next meal, how you're going to feed your family, how you're going to take care of yourself. How much more stressful is it to live a life when you don't know how you're going to be able to support yourself? Racism. Again, consider the stress of racism. Consider the anger, the just the pure, the feeling of being disregarded as a human being. And it's really easy for me to say this. You know, I'm a white woman living in the United States. It's really easy for me to say how racism feels. I'm being sarcastic. I have no idea because I haven't had to live through this. Sexism, I'm a woman in the United States. It's much easier probably for a man to survive, to be able to fend for themselves because they're typically not raising children. Typically, I'm saying typically. capitalism and education. These are all factors that could have an impact on crime. The strain theory. These are all social factors that have an impact on criminal behavior. Strain theory, basically, there's so much pressure being put on people to survive, to get to the next level, that a lot of times people will go to the other side, to criminal behavior, in order to get to the next level. Anomie, feeling of being alienated or a condition that renders a person hopeless. Sometimes you have got, you get to your wit's end, and hopelessness is a factor when people kind of give up. There is an inability to achieve desired goals. A lot of times there is a lack of opportunity, and then peer pressure or pressure to be involved in gangs. Social control theory focuses on belief of systems that hold people to society's standards by putting limits on their actions. And people feel like they are controlled by the community. Sometimes this is a good thing. Sometimes it's bad, but sometimes it's a good thing. Some of us are kept in check by social control. Avoiding responsibility or neutralization theory. Sometimes it's easy for people to commit criminal behavior if they don't have social bonds, if they don't have, if you don't feel guilty about something, if you don't have social relationships, if you don't have that anchor, people you care about, people who you might disappoint, you're more likely to not care as much and not really be concerned about who you hurt when you commit criminal behavior. So having bonds to society is something that keeps control over behavior. And these are some things that work for the social bond theory: attachment, commitment, involvement, and belief. It is important to have social bonds to keep from committing criminal behaviors or being involved in criminal behaviors. If you have no one to anchor you, you're more likely to commit criminal behavior. Same thing. Presence of multiple aspects of social bond in a person makes a person unlikely to commit a crime. Same. Cultural deviance theory focuses on how social traditions with which people live around and the subcultures with which they identify contribute to the values that guide their behaviors. Again, if the people around you are deviants, you are more likely to be a deviant. If the people around you are not deviants, you are less likely to be a deviant. So social disorganization theory, this is kind of the concept that if your neighborhood doesn't have a lot of support, if the police are a mess, if you don't have a solid kind of social services area, church, boys and girls clubs, those types of places in your neighborhood, you are more likely to go astray. Schools as well. You are more likely to go astray and end up with criminal behavior. This is Shaw and McKay's concentric circles zone photo. And basically what they're showing here, social disorganization, kind of back to what we're kind of sort of talking about here. This, we'll call this the city of Fresno. It's not, but we'll call it the city of Fresno. And what they're trying to say here, or basically show in a little picture, is down here in the center of the city of Fresno. Again, we're just acting like this is Fresno. Down here in the center of the city of Fresno. Oh, where do we go? There we are. This is probably the most disorganized area in the city of Fresno. If you were to try and buy a home in the city of Fresno, this would be the cheapest area. It's the central business district. There's not a lot of neighborhood support down here. You're going to have new immigrants moving down here. You're going to have a lot of homelessness down here. You're going to have your homeless shelters and things like that down here. But ultimately, not a lot of people are going to want to live down here. They only are living down here because they have to, and your crime rates are going to be higher in this area. As you move outward, the areas become more organized and they become more expensive and the crime rates go down. So think of this as like downtown Fresno and this as like the Bluffs. And the further you get from downtown, the lower the crime rates. Does that make sense? And if you think about it, it's probably true for every city. Subculture, group that has some of the same norms, values, and beliefs as the dominant culture. The social process theory explains the development stages leading to delinquent behavior. So, excuse me, it's not COVID. Proponents emphasize factors like interaction with others, socialization, imitation, reinforcement, role modeling, and reaction of others to our behavior. So you can see that the social process theory could easily be used for good or bad, right? All these things could be used to encourage a good social process or a negative social process. Looking glass self is the idea that people define themselves the way they perceive that others see them. That's tough. Imagine when you look at yourself, you know, or maybe you don't. Most of the time we as humans see ourselves in a much harsher light than others see us. Labeling theory, I always use the example of being a teacher or an instructor. Imagine I have Joe in my class, and Joe is a nightmare student. 2 years later, I have Joe's brother, Pete, and as soon as I meet Pete, I know he's Joe's brother. And before I even say hi to Pete, I automatically think that Pete is going to be a nightmare just because Joe was. That's an example of a labeling theory. And Pete might be a great guy, but I don't know because I've already made a decision about him. Victimology, I think there were a couple of you that were interested in victimology, but victimology is the scientific study of victims. Risk of becoming a victim, offenders target individuals who display attributes that make them easy prey. This is crazy because you will see people get victimized over and over again, and it's very weird and it's hard to understand, but it happens. The attributes, behavioral, physical, social, and attitudinal. And I can't tell you what it is. But criminals know. They know. And recidivist victims. These are people with high levels of obtrusive and unobtrusive vulnerabilities who are victimized repeatedly. How this happens, I don't know, but it does. It does. And I'm not going to ask you about this, but I am just going to we're not going to talk that much about victims. Again, I'm sorry, I hate to be like that in this class, but I don't talk, we don't ask a lot about victims in the class. The book covers it a lot, so that's good. And that's it.